Hey everyone, welcome back to POL 702, Advanced Techniques of Political Science Research. This week we're going to continue our discussion of modeling dichotomous outcomes, okay? And in particular, what we're going to focus on now is working with logistic regression models in R using the RSTAN-ARM package and STAN GLM, okay? Just quickly, the outline for the videos that I'm going to prepare for this week. We will briefly talk about priors in the logistic regression framework in STAN and why priors can be useful beyond incorporating prior information, but also to regularize estimates and ultimately deal with some issues that we have in the regular logistic regression framework. For example, when we deal with small sample sizes or with perfect separation, what we talked about briefly already last week. Okay. Then the second set of videos will focus on visualization and how to graph logistic regression and binary data, how to communicate our results, how to ultimately plot our coefficients and visualize the model results that we actually get. Okay, so that will be a lot of code on actually to show you how to visualize the results, but also convey the uncertainty. Okay, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about predictive simulation and average predictive comparisons. So as we will discuss, looking at or kind of computing differences in expected values for different independent variables of interest is a little bit more complicated as soon as we kind of go beyond the basic linear regression framework. We're going to talk about why, and we're going to talk about how we can then ultimately compute meaningful comparisons for communicating and evaluating our effect sizes in the logistic or Logit model framework. Okay, and then in the last set or in the last video, I'm going to talk about residuals, how to plot residuals for discrete data regression, and relatedly how to evaluate model fit specifically. Okay, so we have a couple of videos. They're all more technical. Last week we kind of covered or more practical. Last week we kind of covered the theoretical background, the model specification itself, how to understand the model itself and how it compares to the linear regression framework. And this week we will focus much more on actual coding problems, on how to create visualizations, how to interpret coefficients. So it will be a lot more practical with like direct applications compared to last week's video. So I hope this will also be useful for the upcoming assignment. Okay, so your to-do list for this week, as always, please watch the lecture videos and go through the code on RStudio Cloud as you watch them. This is I can't stress this enough. This is an integral part of this class, particularly to also go through the code and really go understand each of those commands step by step. Okay. The required reading for this week is chapter 14 in our textbook, but I have a couple of additional readings on Canvas as well. We have the 4th chapter of the long book, where you already read a chapter in the previous week that gives you a little bit more detail on kind of the classical hypothesis testing framework, or in the classical frequentist framework. And then there are 2 other papers that focus, that give a little bit more in-depth discussion of some common issues that we have with the kind of frequentist logistic regression framework. Particularly, the King and Zheng paper focuses on using logistic regression when we have very infrequent, very low probability events. Basic logit models can be problematic in cases like that. And Rainey focuses on a similar related issue, namely logistic regression and logit models in the context of small samples, because the basic frequentist framework, of course, requires, at least for logits, requires large sample or requires large samples, relies on the central limit theorem. And so oftentimes in our applications in political science, we don't have sufficiently sized samples. And so it turns out that, at least in the frequentist basic framework, logit models tend to be biased for small samples. And that paper kind of discusses that issue a little bit more. So if you in your own applied work, for example in comparative politics or international relations, are interested in modeling binary outcomes, but you have very small sample sizes, or you have very rare events, then you should definitely check out these papers for additional background information, because that will definitely be helpful. Okay. Lastly, of course, you have to finish assignment 4. It's posted on Canvas in RStudio Cloud. And a lot of the code that I'm showing you this week will be directly relevant to solve this assignment. So it definitely helps to not only watch the videos, but again, actually go through the lecture code as you watch it. Okay. So much for the overview. In the next video, I'm going to talk about logistic regression priors.